I finally just pulled my spare tire out. It was heavy enough, and I lashed it in up front and then put my pack on top of it. And we had to come up that stink bank to come out on that last day. It worked out some back muscles pulling them canoes near about vertical up that 12-foot bank. We got it out of there.
I remember that.
Yeah.
It really was a lot of work getting those canoes up a bank.
And a Bassett.
Yeah, straight up and down, and a Bassett.
Biscuit just loved you so much and was just having such a great time. Like to go over and lean over the canoe and bark at the fish.
Yeah. And she loved fishing.
Mm-hmm.
She really did. When I'd catch a fish and bring it in the canoe, she would hop on it till she could hold it down with her paw, and then she was happy.
We had big snakes and big alligators down there.
Yeah.
12-foot high banks at low tide and 8-foot high at high tide. Black.
It was wonderful.
Goo. Oh, it was just a joy. We just had so much fun.
Well, at nighttime, you know, in the swamp canoeing, you just pull your canoe up between two small cypress trees and tie your hammock and climb in it over your canoe, and you got your firebox in the middle of your canoe and build your fire there and cook and never get out, never get in that mud, and nothing to it.
I had more, the last time we did a video, I had more people ask about how do you build a fire in a canoe. And I said it's a wood box with dirt in it, you're building on that.
Let's take a square of wood, 16 or 18 inches, about 3 inches high, with a bottom on it. Fill it up with sand when I first got in there. Take a couple of pieces of charcoal and light them off. There in the middle of that sand, it's not going to get hot enough, and there's your fire. You can just add little pieces of green wood to it, keep your coals going. So when you first get in there, you put your coffee on with 2 eggs in the bottom.
Yeah.
By the time your coffee's perked, you got 2 soft-boiled eggs to eat.
Yeah. Then
when you catch your first fish, you take him, split him open down the middle, wash him out, take some push pins, tack him on the board, just split it open, rub your salt, pepper, and lemon juice in it. About a little bit, he's cooked. And then you just eat the flakes of meat off and throw the skin and bones over the side for the turtles. Nothing to it.
I had forgot about you used to cook eggs in the coffee pot.
Yeah.
Make soft poached eggs in the coffee.
Yeah.
When something else you did one time, it was a winter camp, a winter canoe. And we were going to spend the day on the creek. That was when we put in the 6-hour float up on old 55.
Yeah.
Floating down. And I remember we got down there to the sandbar and you pulled out your coffee pot, opened up the coffee pot, and you pulled out these packets of aluminum foil where you'd already measured out like instant potatoes or whatever, and just boil water and add it, just turned the aluminum foil into a bowl, poured the boiling water in it, and then threw the coffee in it. Was sitting there eating mashed potatoes, camp taters. It was a mixture of instant potatoes and gravy already made up. So it was camp taters, and you had like 3 or 4 meals we had that day, and that night we ended up back at your place. All of them were in that pot.
I remember that. I had a small ball of tin foil, and I just put it over the fire and rolled it every once in a while. And when I opened it up, I had ground up hamburger, onions, carrots, and all. We had that, and then we had our potatoes on the side and our beans and all on the side.
Yep.
And well, you know, it's like when I make Uncle Dog's Finest whiskey. I took it and strained it through dried apples, which gave it just a wonderful flavor. And you didn't realize what you were getting into. And some guys just abused it.
And then it bit them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, my God. There was somebody that came to one of our gatherings at, no, wait a minute, that was a Scottish thing down there in Tallahassee. Not Tallahassee. Panama City.
Oh, yeah.
That fella come up and sat down and went to talking, and you had that flask, Uncle Dog's Finest, sipping on it. and he wanted to try it, and he took about 5 hits from that. And you told him, it will catch up with you, you might not want to do that. And then remember, I had to help him to the porta potty because nature was calling and he couldn't stand up and walk in a straight line. Oh, it's don't let people think I'm drunk. No, sir, not at all.
One of the best things that happened down there is that night we would all gather in kilts and everything to eat. And I told Ann they were supposed to come at 6 o'clock, you know, and we were going to go down below decks and eat. And I told Ann, I said, Tritt, old Mud Trap, and Larry always come early. And I said, tonight I'm going to educate them. I said, you go ahead and get ready. And I went ahead and I put on my socks and shoes, because that's the hardest thing to put on when you're wearing kilts the right way. And sure enough, at 5:45 there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door and there's Tritt, and Larry's standing there, and I'm standing there butt naked except for socks and shoes. And I said, what the hell are you doing? I'm playing a game of the Laird and the Sheep Girl. What are you doing here early? And I slammed the door.
I remember that.
They never came back early again.
I remember that. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They went down and told everybody that the Laird was playing the game of Laird and the Sheep Girl.
Yeah.
And don't interfere.
Don't get too close. How about the time down there at Mobile that Larry forgot his kilt?
Oh, yeah.
And I had those military officers' wool pants. And somebody told him, go see if Blackie's got an extra pair of them pants, you could wear them instead. And so there's a knock at the door, and I open the door, and Larry says, I need to borrow your pants.
We were down there
at
the Lions Inn getting ready to party. Well, we had already partied. And we're playing the pipes and singing our songs outside. We got a little fire, and here comes the police department. And when we got there, because with the fire and the people not being used to it, they called in a bunch of men in skirts. We think it's a homosexual gathering.
Right.
And the chief deputy came, and he was one of our bagpipers.
Yes.
And we did not get a ticket for partying. In fact, the party went on.
How about when we were at Fog Cutters in Huntsville, and you had ordered a round of Glenlivet for all of us, and we were on like round number 5 or whatever. And we done had a great meal, and we're just sitting and talking, you, me, and Jeff. And
we're in the library.
We're in the library, and the ladies are doing their stuff, and we were all smoking pipes and enjoying a small libation and talking about the world and day's events. And they ran out and they tried to substitute cheap stuff for us. And we'd already had like 5 or 6 rounds, and they walked up and sat it down, and we instantly knew it was the wrong color, and this was not what we had ordered.
As soon as I tasted that, I told them what it was.
Yep.
And I said, you send me the bartender.
Yeah.
He came up there and then admitted, well, I asked him to bring Famous Grouse instead, because that's a good blended Scotch whiskey. In fact, at that time, Famous Grouse was the most popular Scotch in Scotland, because a lot of Scots couldn't afford single malt whiskey.
Yep.
So they drank Famous Grouse. I have a bottle of it back there, and I have a bottle of a lot of stuff back there.
Well, now you told me the faux
I
pas
even
you
have
made.
a bottle of Cutty Sark back there.
Ooh.
For a friend of mine who used to
Come
drink
over.
kerosene.
Yeah. I remember you told me where you'd gone to France, I think it was, when you were going over there and NATO exchange, you were working with foreign militaries and stuff, and you asked for water and didn't realize water was about the most expensive thing you could ask for.
Oh yeah, that was France.
They would give you wine all day, but you were trying to be nice because you were southern raised like I am, and that would be rude.
I was at a meal at a house.
Yep.
Retired, excuse me, retired Legionnaire captain.
Yeah.
and I was eating at his place and asked for a glass of water and did not know, and then later on I found out, and I never did that again. I
Yeah.
just drank red wine.
Yeah. Wine's cheap, water's expensive.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, they really don't do pure water there. Almost everything was contaminated then,
Mm-hmm.
like our water now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of our stuff, when they were building the nuclear bomb up there in Tennessee, and they dumped all that stuff into the aquifer up there, and it leached down into Alabama.
Plus the DDT factory for Alabama was located up there at Huntsville,
Yeah.
and that's the Tennessee River,
Yeah.
and it came right on down here to the southern border.
Yeah. You know, something that came out of Alabama that you and I both enjoyed one time down there at the cabin was that documentary on PBS about canoeing the Tallapoosa, I think it was, that young man.
Oh, he canoed all the way from Birmingham to Mobile.
All the way out in the Gulf.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Took him 26 days
Yeah.
because he enjoyed it.
And it showed the pollution where he came up, where that paper plant is dumping all that tannin and everything, because they extract the tannin out of the wood pulp.
That was down at Mobile.
Yeah, and it gets boiling up in the river, and so the river stinks like I'll get out from this point on down. And it was because they just pay the fine. They don't even try to hide the fact. They just pay the fine. It's cheap compared to what cleaning.
Yeah, but that cleaned it up because Sierra Club and a lot of the others like that went in and instituted lawsuits against him.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lot higher than a fine because
Yeah.
they were guilty and he had it filmed.
It was absolutely just that pipe just boiling up in the middle of the river. No, this ain't no minor discharge. They're just dumping tanks. But
Yeah, he graduated from high school, and that's what he wanted for his graduation gift. He had him a little solar plate, and he used it to recharge his batteries and run his camera and his phone and everything. And
yeah, I canoed the Choctawhatchee all the way to the Gulf when I was 13.
I canoed Choctawhatchee. I canoed the little and the big.
Yeah. I'd love to do it again, but I did not realize that when you cross the border into Florida, the entire Choctawhatchee River is a state park in Florida. The entire length of it. I didn't know that.
I didn't either, but then that's happened since my time
since
there.
mine too, but
But you know, I used to put in the Okefenokee and come all the way down.
well, we had one time back in the 90s, you and I talked about, because we could put in on Pigeon Creek, run it down to the Sapulga, take the Sapulga to the Conecuh. When that crosses over into Florida, it becomes the Escambia and come out in Pensacola.
I did that.
Yeah, you did, but we talked about us doing it, and it just never happened back in them days. So.
I did that. The only thing is, once I got down into the Gulf area, the tides got me. I had to pull out a little early.
Well, that's what got me, because when I read the book Canoeing the Cree by Eric Severide, and I was in...
What a great book.
It was a fantastic book. And that's what inspired me. We were getting out for summer, and I got my best friend, James Cable, and told him we're going to canoe the Choctawhatchee all the way to the Gulf. And he said, you got to talk Mom into that. And it ended up being me and James and Todd and Nathan. And Todd's dad was active duty on Rooker. And I went to each one of the parents, laid it all out, how we were doing it, all the provisions, how we would be. And I said, look, we're not going to be in the middle of the outback. This is somebody's farm we're floating through. If we get in trouble, climb up on a bank
Walk a mile.
and walk and get help. And that every time we went under a bridge, we had purple sidewalk chalk. We'd make a big oval and we'd put a cross of Lorraine in it. And so if we don't end up, just start looking under the bridges, and they got to here, but they didn't get to here. We got to be between these 2 points. And every one of those mamas said the same thing. Although they weren't all together, but everyone said the same thing. Bring my boy back.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went, we canoed it all the way, and what I did not take into account, we got down there and got into Choctawhatchee Bay, was tide. And so, hitting 3-foot seas in an open canoe, it pitched
And
up
it's
and down.
against you.
Oh yeah, and
You're
it's
not
trying to
going
drive you
anywhere.
up on that bank, and you can't get far enough out because the wind's driving you. You had to turn out to get out, and then as soon as you turn to go down, it's going to push you right back to the bank. We finally ended up walking that last 12 miles around to that little state park in waist deep water, just bobbing it. And we finally got there, and I called Todd's dad and told him, he said, "You want me to come get you now?" And I said, "To be honest, sir, we done put up our canoe and we done got our tents up. We're going to sleep." And he said, "I'll pick you up in the morning." About 7 the next morning, he came in and we loaded both the canoes up on top of that Suburban. And he took a picture of us with that Polaroid camera, standing at the back of it, and I'm standing there holding a single shot shotgun. I've got a .22 pistol on my hip. Todd had a .22. Nathan had a .22 rifle. I think James had a single shot .410. I was the oldest. I was 13. And Todd was actually 11. He didn't turn 12 until like 2 months later.
See, I canoed to Choctawhatchee when I was 12, and my brother Jack, who was 7, went with me.
Mm-hmm.
And the only place we were worried about, because it hadn't been open then, Choctawhatchee was wild.
Uh-huh.
And there was a place called Roaring Cutoff that
Yeah.
drowned people. And I did exactly what Dad said. When I got within a quarter of a mile of it, we took our boat out, our canoe out, and we drug it through the woods for half a mile and put in below Roaring Cutoff and went on down.
That's the famous waterfall that's on all the rivers because it's a fault line down here.
Right.
The one on P River, it's a hard J-hook. So you don't realize it until you're in it. It's a J-hook. You can't see it straight away. And it normal water, it's a 2-foot drop.
You know, that line goes all the way across the state of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I've come to it, well, River Falls is named for
Yeah.
that because that's where the fault is.
Mm-hmm.
When I canoed to Sapulga, the fault's there, all of these streams.
Yeah. Well, when me and Davy Hobbs ran it with Whitewater Lawn Hunters, doing a camp out, and we're going along, and Reed's Eddy is what it's called over on P River. And I told David, we'd been there before, I said, I'm not going to know what it's going to be, how big a drop it is. It can be 6 foot.
Yeah.
It's too low. I said, so this is what's going to happen. When we get in there, he was in the bow, I'm anchor man, I'm in the back. I told him, I said, when I tell you get stable, I'm going to stand up. Spread your feet wide, I'm going to stand up so I get the most look. If it's too big a drop, we're going to ground on the left bank. Don't try to cut across the right, the current's too strong. We're going to ground on the left bank, we're going to walk it down, and then we're going to do it that way. If I say we're shooting it, you paddle like a Y50 until I say get down. When I do, you get down, and we're going to go off that drop. Dave was gung-ho. He'd follow me. And so, of course, there's 8 or 10 ahead of us in this group, and we're strung out over 4.5 miles, really. And when we got up there, and there's some guys wading around up on the upper part, and it's pretty rapid current right there, and we got going. And I stood up and I looked, and I could see stuff floating in the water down here on the other end where they done wiped out and gone over sideways and everything. And the guys going like, don't try it, don't try it. And it was only about a 4-foot drop. And I thought we could do it in that 17-foot canoe. And so I told David, and we put our backs into it, and we were playing a Y50, and just about at the precipice, I said, get down. And I did not know there was a sub-basement in the damn canoe, but David got, under, I could see the seat and I couldn't see David. I swear he flattened on the bottom. And we went off and we splashed and we swamped a pretty good bit of water, but we were still upright. Everything was in watertight bags, and we fished and went across it. And everybody's out there floating gear, everything. Oh,
you know, almost every one of those faults have a V. And
Look
if
for
you
the
know
V.
where it's at, you can run it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are J-hook, like you said, you got to
Uh-huh.
turn into the V. Some of them are straight line, because I have run every one of the faults just about in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Have you ever run a Sepulveda?
oh yeah.
I always wanted to
It
go up.
has got some beautiful 30-foot banks.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't believe.
Uh-huh.
With the moss and the drippage.
Uh-huh.
I mean, just beautiful.
It's a wilderness area here in Alabama, up there in the Bankhead, that I've read about. I've been to little pieces of it, but
Up there at Double Springs.
I have always wanted to go up and canoe the Sepulveda. And I'm never going to make it to Alaska. I'm not going to say never, but it just probably ain't never going to happen.
Well, I'm never going to make Alaska again either.
So,
I'm planning a trip this fall to Nashville.
mm-hmm.
We're having one of the companies I served with in Vietnam is
Mm-hmm.
going to have a company-size reunion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try to make it. It'll be my last hurrah. I'm in my 80s. I'm hurt.
Yeah.
I've broken my back twice on parachute jumps.
Mm-hmm.
I've been shot up 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's part of life for me. And I know it, so I don't do things stupid.
Well, that's the thing for me. I've got health issues, stuff like that. You just take it day by day, and when it's stacked against you, you kick back, relax, and wait for it to pass. Don't push it. When it's good, go with it. And I
That's
try
what
to
I
do it.
My good days, I do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In my bad days, I sit there and
Read a book.
read, listen to music,
Hope has learned that
watch documentaries, or
if I get the swelling around my heart, and you and I one time, several years ago, is after I'd had my heart attacks, and we were going to go canoeing that morning. And we got up that morning, and we didn't end up going. You never asked me what was wrong, but you could tell something was wrong. And it was swelling around my heart, and I just got up that morning. I'm weak as a little kitten. I can't hardly breathe. And you just got to wait for the swelling to go down. Do these certain things. It's congestive heart failure, and let it go. But on my good days, I still try to do stuff, and I'm lucky enough I've got so many young'uns, these, what we used to call kittens,
yeah,
kittens back in the day, that want to learn, and I want to pass on the knowledge and go take the time with them. It's just making sure they understand there's going to be times I can't go.
yeah. Well, that's why I quit telling kids I would do something, because to me, when you tell a kid something,
You got to do it.
you got to do it.
Yep.
And it just got where I had days I couldn't go,
Mm-hmm.
and I was not going to tell a kid something I could not do.
Yep.
But
Because we've both gone anyway,
Right,
gritting your
but-
teeth trying to
yeah,
stand up.
but on days that I could show up, because I tell them, if I can show up, I'll be there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll teach this, and this, or
Mm-hmm.
you can use my land to camp on,
Mm-hmm.
canoeing halfway down, or
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've done a lot. And I'm rather amazed at, and I don't mean this mean, but how little a lot of these young people have done. You know, like you talking about when you was a kid, you canoed the river. That was expected when we were young. Us boys, you know, you was rough and tumble, you got your scrapes, your boo-boos. If it wasn't broke or bleeding really, really bad, you just toughed it out.
you wasn't allergic to anything because you ate dirt.
You ate dirt. You did whatever. You were dirty all the time. You know, you learned and you did. And us kids, you know, we took off from home because Mama would find something for you to do, by God. You had chores. You do your chores.
Yeah.
But other than that, you found something else to do. And we went and we played in the woods and hunted and fished. And I won't call a name, but Hope, my wife, was recently in a situation where it's a young lady. She's about 24 years old. And she's well educated. She's in her field. And Hope was doing some business. And the young lady wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And it was causing some problems. And so Hope spoke to her in a stern voice about, get off your damn phone. We got work to do. Let's get going. And the little lady just fell apart. Hope had to wrap around her and let her squall for 5 minutes because she, don't be mean to me. I'm like, that was mean. Good God. And the things that we did in our day of heavy labor, heavy work, dangerous stuff, but it gave you confidence. And like you were saying earlier, we faced the adversity of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could get screwed up right here if you're not careful. But when it did go bad, we'd all jump in together to get you out of it. When it went well, great. When you made a minor screw up, we'd all laugh at you and you'd laugh with us. You had to learn to laugh at yourself. Like me setting myself on fire in a sleeping bag.
Yeah, that
me
was
eating
one
dog
of the
food.
dumber things I'd seen.
Hey,
That wasn't the dumbest thing I'd ever seen,
No.
but it was up there real good.
it was in the top 10, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But we went through a lot of stuff. I mean,
But I'm on, in our camping, I remember back finding, we were at Washington's birthday frolic. Cold. That's when I taught y'all how to make a Dakota.
Dakota hole, because we had the coffee pot on for 45 minutes and never boiled.
Yeah, water wouldn't get hot until I showed you that.
Mhm.
Well, a young lady got wet that night. Next morning she was walking around in a daze about daylight, and I saw her, saw what it was. She was second or third stage hypothermia.
Yeah.
Got her in my tent, got some lukewarm, didn't want to get real hot
Yeah.
soup in her, but lukewarm soup in her.
Mhm.
Got her clothes changed, got her under a blanket, brought her back around.
Got her core up.
Yep. Dried her clothes off in front of my little heater there. And it just would amaze me at what people did not know
Yeah.
about living. And I look now at some of the news on TV and I think, how could anybody be that stupid to do something like that? But I probably did that, but I did it at a young age where I didn't hurt myself and said, hey, don't do this anymore.
You remember the member of our group that for a short time there, that she's one that got married up there at that church. We went up where Doc John went up and had to pick up the ring there, that one. She had her daughter Coel, and she was 4 weeks old, and she had come up there to Frozen Foot. Winter camp, it was going to be in the 20s that night, and she brought that infant out there to camp with us, and we put her in your pack basket and wrapped her up in a couple of beaver skins and built 3 fires and put that pack basket in the middle of it, and every time she looked up, the mama told us later, she said, every time I looked up that night, one of the uncles, which means one of us, was up stoking the fire and rotating the basket. That kid never woke up cold once in the night. All of us uncles kept getting up and stoking the fire and turning the basket to roast her. And that baby stayed in that fur and was just as warm and happy as she could be. We changed diapers. We took care of the little one. We had a lot of little ones along the time that are now grown men and women.
I know it. I look at some of these, I get cards from them. Addressed to Uncle Grouch. And they got 4 kids and one of them is in high school.
Yeah.
And it's addressed to Uncle Grouch.
I know. I'm the same way. I'm Uncle Blackie. And I've got friends that I was friends with their mama that's now their grandmama.
Yeah.
And I got a phone call back around Christmas time from Tennessee, from somebody I knew for a long time. And they said that you knew Daddy better than anybody else, and we're all Granddaddy better than anybody else. He's told such stories about you, and we want to get him something for his 70th birthday. And so, what would be something he would really enjoy? And the family had reached out to me, and I hadn't seen the man in 12 years. He's still a friend, but just drift apart. And so that was his grandson, who's a grown man now, asking me what to get him. something that he would really enjoy, and I pointed out a couple things that he really, really used to love. And we all camped together and stuff.
Well, see, I've got 4 grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
2 great-grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 great-great-grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm beginning to feel a little old.
Well, you get a little experienced. Got a little bit of buffing on this leather, yeah.
At least I have rich, luxurious, chestnut brown hair with subdued flecks of gray in it.
Yeah, the subdued flakes of gray. I remember that. That's something I started doing on my channel, talking about, I started talking to the Silver Wolves. Us old guys that's got silver, and that our job is to pass it on now to the next generation, to teach them. And I do things to help those Silver Wolves stay in camp, be able to go out. I've got a video I'll be posting. When they see this, it will be the Friday before it. But talking about a Moses stick and a walking stick, you know, how to use it. And because a lot of my guys that subscribe to me are in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And they came up, they had professional lives and etc. And now they're wanting to kind of remember some of the stuff that they did when they were young, before they had families and they had to work for a mortgage and everything else, and spend time with the granddaughters and the grandsons and try to pass on a little bit, you know.
Well, one of the books that I read when I was a boy was Two Little Savages.
Mm-hmm.
The city kid and the country kid. And
Mm-hmm.
the country kid, the city kid went to the country for 2 months, and they made bows, they made teepees, and it told you how to do it in there. So I did it all,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
The Golden Book of Camping.
Oh yeah,
I want that.
that's in here somewhere.
You told me I could have that for my collection whenever.
Yeah, that's in
I
here
want that
somewhere.
one. And that, I remember going into the public library in like 2nd grade and finding that book.
Yeah.
And it so inspired me.
Yeah, it tells you how to do everything.
How to make a tent.
How to make a tent, how to
Yeah.
make a diamond,
Yeah.
you know.
And my granny had a big old chifforobe of, because we're right literally 2 blocks from the cotton mill. And so she got all kinds of stuff from that or whatever. Back in the days when you still had flour sacks, had prints and stuff to make into shirts or whatever. And there was a big old chifforobe that was just solid full of cloth. And I got Granny's permission, and it was probably about an 8-ounce canvas. And I made me a little diamond tarp, probably 6 by 6. And that's what I camped out in the backyard when I was 6 or 7. I'd string it up against the little pecan tree we had. You know, I'd seen pictures, I'd whatever, and read stuff. And that was my first tent that I put up. I remember the first time I went through a rainstorm and I didn't get wet. I was sitting on an overturned Coca-Cola case and had that little bitty thing set up, and I had learned to point toward the storm so it didn't blow in the front. And my granny came, it was raining, boy. It was pouring. Granny came to the back porch and hollered for me to come in. I said, I'm dry. She said, well, if you get wet, come in. And that storm lasted 45 minutes. When it finally passed, I was still dry. I was so proud I thought I could walk on water.
Let me tell you something I learned a week or 2 ago.
Mm-hmm.
We had a local lawyer and then judge here wrote a book
Mm-hmm.
about a young lady over in Opp, and he had a lot of interesting facts in it. But one of the things is Opp was a big cotton town
Mm-hmm.
because they made cloth. One of their biggest customers was Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
because they made special cloth for them, and Hollywood painted scenes on it.
The background, yeah.
For background, and not only that, back before they have all the stuff they got now, when people were going in cars,
Mm-hmm.
that was actually scenery on car on 2 rollers
Mm-hmm.
going past.
Mm-hmm.
That was planted, and we had part of my family took their money from the mill and went out there and became the McGowans in Hollywood and
Mm-hmm.
made movies and became actors and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they got to be uptown because they changed the spelling of their name to the old Scottish spelling where
Mm-hmm.
it's Macgowan.
Mm-hmm.
They're from Chapman, Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
and ours is Mcgowin, but
Mm-hmm.
I guess in Hollywood you have to put on the dog, I don't know.
Families change over time. When my family got over here, it was Mac Thomas. And then somewhere around, when you go back and look at the first census of Alabama, which was in 1820, because we became a state in 1819, the first official census. And it is listed, about half the brothers are listed as Thomas, and the other half are listed as Mac Thomas. So somewhere around 1820 is when they dropped the Mac and just became Thomas.
Well, they didn't drop it most of the time. What happened is a clerk did not have a good education
And we just,
that did it.
yep.
And he changed the spelling of a lot of names, like the name Mackay, Mackay, is actually pronounced Mackay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see a lot of weird spellings
Oh yeah.
with that one, you know.
Well, the family over time will change, and somebody will be kicked out and they'll change their name, or somebody will get a lot of money and they'll change their name, trying to distance themselves from the poorer relations. It's true of just about everybody like that.
Yeah. You know the James boys, Frank and Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know them that well, so never called them by their first name.
Right.
They used to come to Selma and stay for 6 or 8 weeks because nobody looked for them down here.
Yep. They'd run to the
That
south.
hotel is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, a friend of mine bought it and rehabbed it,
Mm-hmm.
and even went and bought the original safe that was in it, but he didn't have it on the bottom deck. He got a crane out,
Mm-hmm.
put it on the second floor. But little things like that and get lost in history.
Mm-hmm. When I tell you, I've often wondered, I know what they officially say, but the town of Opp, I've always felt it had to be shortened from either Opportunity or shortened from Oppenheimer.
No, it was a man named Opp
Yeah,
that ran the first depot there.
but again, his name being Opp,
He was from Germany.
he was probably a shortening down of Oppenheimer, and
Well,
they just called him
It
Opp.
might have been, but it happened a long time before he got there.
Yeah, but it's one of them things where the name,
Yeah.
the letters don't go together that common in the English language.
Yeah.
And so I've often thought it had to be a shortening of some big, might have been a German, whatever name, that just was so unwieldy for people to pronounce that he just went by Opp. And then again, you got people that's got odd names. My granddaddy's name was Hobby, H-O-B-B-Y. His brother's name was Hubbard, as in Old Mother Hubbard. They were just picking names. They weren't literate people, and so they picked a name. My daddy's name was Reuben, which was out of the Bible somewhere. I hadn't found it. Then there was Henry. Henry was named after Heck Thomas, whose real name was Henry Thomas, and was born over here in Georgia. And he had gone out in Oklahoma and became one of the famous lawmen out there. And Henry was named after him because that was in my family. And then there was Benny, B-E-N-N-I. They didn't know how to spell Benjamin, so they just said Benny. He was named after Benjamin Franklin. Benny, right. Everybody had a name. They would come up with names. A lot of the poor people a lot of times it was simple to spell names because it was easy for them to spell because they weren't literate. They learned how to make a mark, or they learned how to spell their name, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so I know so many communities started out, and all over my area over there, there's New Hopes. There's about 11 New Hopes that I've been to. It's where this place went bust and the community had moved, and they name it New Hope or New Prosperity or Tabernacle or whatever, hoping to incur divine favor in their new prospects. So,
Well, my first name is Francis, and that was once the second most popular first name in Scotland because of Mary Queen of Scots married Francis the Dauphin of France, and when he died, she went back to Scotland and became the queen there.
Yeah.
But my father was named after an Episcopal priest named Francis, who was Scottish. And of course, I was named Francis after him.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, it was a very popular name over here, and then it didn't become a popular name. I like it. It means friendly and peace-loving, you know, and that describes me to a T.
Well, we had a Dorsey. You had a Dorsey in your family.
I had a D'Orsay.
D'Orsay. We had a Dorsey.
A little D, apostrophe, capital O. It means house of Orsay.
Ah.
And my grandfather D'Orsay, his mother was a von Wolfgang, which was high class.
Right.
And of course his family were D'Orsays, and they were famous for making perfume in France and had made a lot of money and were middle class, upper middle class.
But we had Foy, F-O-Y. I had an Uncle Foy. I had Luke's, Slim, Uncle Slim. I still can't tell you what the man's real name was. The entire family called him Slim. So Slim. A Peck. My aunt's name was Peck, P-E-C-K, Aunt Peck. I often thought it was but you'd also hear her called Willie Pearl. And so I think her legitimate name was Willie Pearl, and she got the nickname of Peck early on, so the whole family just called her Peck.
Probably some little dude couldn't say Pearl.
Yeah.
And
it sticks.
Right, and it sticks.
You know, and that's the problem. We were doing our history research. You'd get in there and you'd get into names and stuff that were phonically spelled, and you're not sure exactly what they were trying to say. Was it in one of the famous books? I don't remember if it was Seed Time on the Cumberland or whatever, but he's talking about planting.
That's a good book.
Oh yeah, a real good book. But he was talking, and he meaning cucumber, but the way he spelled it was cockamammer, you know. And so what the hell's a cockamammer? It's that, and all kinds of stuff. We had that's something when you used to do the college thing about history they don't put in books that you used to do. And when we used to go do our pre-1840 fashion show and get up there and we'd talk about history of how and why we got here and the history of all of it. And people just had no idea we're here. Most people can't even tell you their great-grandparents' names.
See, I know, because we had it run back, that my family took possession of a land grant on December the 24th, 1774 in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
And their possession is now down where Culloden is.
Yeah.
And of course they were part of that group of Scots that came over to
found the great state of Georgia.
Right, make money. And my 5 or 6 times great-grandfather fought with the Georgia militia as a rebel or patriot.
Right.
And because of that, as an officer, he got killed. His sons both raided a land grant apiece. And they took their land grant in the new Alabama territory and came across in 1813 and crossed the Conecuh River at what is now McGowan Bridge and McGowan Farm, McGowan Store, McGowan Cemetery. And all of that land still belongs to the McGowans. They don't give up much. And Ann's family came here in 1811, so her family and my family have intermarried about 4 or 5 times. Because you married how far you could walk or ride a horse to court.
Well, prior to the Civil War, the average person in the United States was born, lived their entire life, and died in a 25-mile circle.
Yeah.
That was it. You know, you didn't go nowhere, nothing like, unless you were in some sort of industry that required you to travel, you didn't travel. And then after the Civil War, once trains became available, people could go East Coast, and of course the gold rush of '49, it caused a mass exodus from one coast to the other and back, and then throughout all the years. But even my grandmother talked about that when she was born, it was about a 4-hour ride by wagon. And since you're going to average about 3 miles an hour, so it's about 12, 14 miles to Geneva. And so once a month, her mom and dad would take the wagon and leave the girls, and there were 6 girls and 2 boys, and go to town to get supplies, trade, buy, whatever, and they'd spend the night because you couldn't make the distance, buy what you had to do, and come back.
Mm-hmm.
Which I often thought there was probably a saloon involved. They wanted to leave the dang kids home for one night a month. I mean, come on.
Could have been, but they slept under the wagon.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
when I was a boy, for Daddy to go from Andalusia to Georgiana, which is about 35 miles, was an all-day trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there was a grandfather of mine back in the line that he had a team of great big old horses, great big old draft horses, and he would haul a cargo wagon. He'd go down to Geneva and pick up stuff being brought up from the Gulf, or go to Montgomery and get supplies, or go to wherever for farms and stuff like that. And he made these big circuits. And so he'd stop at your farm and ask what you needed, and you'd tell him, and he'd log it down. And then when he come around the next time, he'd have that supply. Well, at night, he just slept between the 2 horses.
Sure.
He'd just unhook them, and they'd lay down, and he'd literally get between them and just lay down and go to sleep. Well, apparently, after World War I, whenever surplus trucks became available, it kind of put him out of business, because now you could get a truck that could do in a day what he did in 3 or 4 to 5 days. You know, because he's only moving like 10, 12 miles a day, making that 30, 45 mile loop going around. And it put him out of business. I wonder what he'd think about today whenever they got aircraft that can fly greater than the speed of sound. And
Ann and I watch the old movies, and you look at people on an aircraft. Well, Ann and I were in our 30s.
mm-hmm.
And they got all of this room, and there's a bar in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not first class.
No. No. You look at the pictures of the luxury liners going across the Atlantic in the 20s.
Yeah.
And the meals.
Look at the mess they got now.
Oh, God, yeah.
But, see, that's why Ann and I both believe that we came along at really one of the best times in American history.
Mm-hmm.
Vaccines were being perfected.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was a kid, you died from the measles.
Yeah.
You died from smallpox. I had friends that died.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when they came out with the vaccines, they didn't say, do you want to take them? They brought them to the school, and we marched out a class at a time, and we took them.
Every one of us has got the scar where we got the smallpox
That's
vaccine.
right.
They didn't ask you.
This bit about, it may give my kid this, or it may give my kid that. It'll keep your kid alive.
Yeah.
You know?
But then again, polio. I was after that.
Yeah,
I remember that.
The sugar cube that we took.
All of us had to
They
take
put
school.
a red drop of
Mm-hmm.
that on there. That was about 56 or 57, right before I went in the Marines.
When I went in, I was in school in '70, and we were still taking at that time. Mm-hmm. I remember we got the air injection, and we got
I never got those.
And then there was something else. There were 3 different things we got in school in that first week or so of you being in first grade. They lined you up like cattle and ran you down there, and then to soften the blow a little bit, they had a bowl of M&Ms.
Ours was a lollipop.
If you
with
did,
a string on it, not a stick.
yes. Ours was M&Ms, and if you didn't cry, you could have a handful of M&Ms. And there were a lot of tough little suckers sitting there gritting their teeth, trying not to cry whenever they injected us. And but all of us got that scar on the shoulder from them time period. But it was a different world back then. But we remember, you and I, we got just a couple minutes left and we'll have to stop. But you remember, people still had fireplaces.
Yeah.
And in the fall, you smelled wood smoke. People were raking leaves, and that, to me, that is always going to be the smell of fall, is burning pecan leaves. Because everybody that had pecan orchards was getting ready for the nuts to start falling, and they were raking up all the leaves to clean up, and you'd smell burning pecan leaves. On a cold morning, you smelled wood smoke, because about every third house had a fireplace still going.
Well, people still bought kerosene for lanterns in 52 and 53 because I worked in a little grocery store for $2 a day, and that was one of my jobs, was going out, turning the handle and pumping up a gallon or 2 gallons of kerosene.
When Eloise hit in 72, it might have been 73, and the storm had passed, and my granny sent me with a big mason jar, that's the biggest thing we had handy, to walk 2 blocks over this little mom and pop gas station, and they still had mechanical gas pumps, and people were lined up trying to get gas. And I come up and I told the guy, I said, she wants kerosene, and he told me to go around the back corner in a 200-gallon tank.
Big square job.
Big square thing with the turn pump, and I set that thing up. You could pivot the head where you're going over a bucket or swinging around and put a hose on it. The hose would clamp onto it and fill up something big. And me sitting there turning it, and the lady looking through the glass watching me like a hawk, making sure I wasn't going to mess it up. I filled it 3/4 of the way up and screwed the lid back onto it. It was a Sessions peanut oil jar.
You know, I remember those hand pumps. You'd go to a gas station and you pump this lever back and forth.
Back and forth.
And you could pump up to 12 gallons.
Yes.
And then of course gravity took over and it ran downhill into your tank.
Well, all the other gas pumps in town were electric by then. But this one was still manual, and so he could pump gas and nobody else could. Yeah.
But you know, when I started working here in Veterans Affairs, one of the things that these World War II veterans that would be putting in for benefits, they would tell me, well, to prove he's from that county, because for Alabama benefits you had to prove that you joined service from Alabama, go down and just get an electric bill. We didn't have electricity here in 1940. Only the little towns had electricity. REI hadn't gotten out in the country.
Yeah.
You know, there was no electric bill. We'll get the school records. That school closed 40 years ago. There are no records. I mean,
that was the problem with my dad's family, because my grandmother was Cherokee. She delivered all of her own kids at the house by herself. And so years later, when you're trying to get proof or something, they wanted a birth certificate, and there ain't no damn birth certificate.
Right.
You were born in the floor in the cabin,
right,
you know.
unless there was a family Bible. My Aunt Lucille, who's the oldest of my aunts, no, Aunt Agnes was the oldest. When Aunt Agnes went down to put in for Social Security, and she was in her 80s, and the only way that she could prove how old she was is students that she had taught in school as a teacher.
Yeah.
And there in their early 60s came down and swore out an affidavit that she had been their school teacher in Chapman, Alabama in 1905.